Welcome to everyone. My name is Krista Eidsness. I'm the head of the Conservatory of Performing Arts at the University of Regina, and I am delighted to welcome you here. This is our last recording for the spring of Journeys in Music, and we're delighted to have Tamsin Johnston with us today. She's the oboist with the RSO. I'm going to start, as we always do. It's become part of our tradition at the University of Regina to remember that we are not the first people to walk this land. We are not the first people to make music in this place. And so we acknowledge that we are situated on the territories of the Nehiyawak, Anishinaabeg, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis Mischief Nation. University of Regina is on Treaty 4 lands with a presence also in Treaty 6. So welcome again. Tamsin, we are delighted. You are my second double read conversation. So this is exciting because I talked to Anna Norris a few weeks ago about bassoon. So I'm excited to hear more about the oboe. And we're going to start, I think, with a video. So if you want to introduce the video again so that we can have that on the recording, that would be great.
Sure thing. So the video that we're going to watch is a recording of the oboe solo from the first movement of Bach's Cantata number 156. I recorded it about 6 weeks ago for Mother's Day. The text of this particular cantata is, "I stand here with one foot in the grave." Now, for those who don't think that that's particularly inspiring for Mother's Day, rest assured the melody is upwardly moving and lyrical, and it's in a very cheerful key, the key of F major.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen so that we can watch the video. And I have to exit the full view. And we'll go here. Awesome. That was beautiful, Tamsin. Yeah. I know that melody. I had no idea that was the text.
Oh, wow. Well, I
don't
think
know where I know it from, but I know the melody, and I had absolutely no idea that was the text. Yeah.
It doesn't sound like it should be the text, does it? It's a pretty happy melody.
No, it absolutely doesn't.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, Carmen, we can hear you.
Oh, hi, Tamsin. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I just want to say about this one. I know it also very well, and it's actually known as arioso. And it's all over the, like cello plays it, violin plays it, piano plays it, everybody. So yeah, it got a life of its own. But beautiful choice, Tamsin, and so nicely played. I'm sure Mom enjoyed it a lot and still does. Okay, so I'm out.
Thank you, Carmen, because that is how I know it. I know it as arioso. You're right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so Tamsin, now that we've heard you play and are delighted by that, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself. You are is the principal oboist for the Regina Symphony Orchestra and the chamber players. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So I joined the RSO in 2013. I was living in Toronto at the time, and taking auditions and freelancing, all that stuff. And I was super fortunate to have won that audition. And a number of my friends, everyone was really happy for me. A number of people expressed quite a bit of surprise that I would leave Toronto to move to the Regina, the prairies. But not only did it, it's easy to say, oh, it worked out for me. It worked out better than I could ever imagine. Yeah, like being principal of the Regina Symphony, we have sort of your normal diet of, symphonic fare, specials like Messiah and summer concerts, sometimes too, and your pop shows, normal orchestra life. But then, as principal oboe of the Regina Symphony Chamber Players, we do a ton of chamber music and chamber orchestra music and repertoire that I wouldn't hope to ever come across or ever get to perform in a professional context. If I played in, say, a larger orchestra like the Calgary Philharmonic or the Vancouver Symphony. So that is actually really the gem of my life here and my job here. And as it turns out, it was almost like fated to be. Before I left Toronto, I played with a woodwind quintet that, yeah, they're still doing awesome. I still count the members among my friends, and it was just a lot of fun. So what I do with the chamber players really feels in some way like an extension of that.
Awesome. Okay,
Yeah.
so I will tell you, I've started apologizing for my first question because it is such a big one. And actually, I'm gonna skip the first question and I'll go to what's on your playlist. I'll start there and then we'll go to the big question. But
Okay.
do you have a playlist? And if you do, what do you like to listen to if you're listening to music?
Okay, so I actually find this question quite hard and complex to answer at times too. But I think it's an interesting question. Um, Obviously, during the symphony season, listening to what's on our programming is mandatory practically. It's super key to preparation. And not only that, you have to listen in usually a very analytical way. And that could be, with stuff that's more complex, that tends to be in many ways an intellectual exercise, and not in a bad way, just that's how it is. However, in recent years, I've definitely, I guess it's fair to say I made an effort to do this, but to sort of turn off that analytical listening, which just took some thinking in order to do that, after all those years at music school, and try to feel what I was listening to, listen in a sort of more visceral way. And it's definitely helped that I've come to enjoy the playlists of many of my non-musician friends, or people who have a musical background but have broadened what they listen to. And even if I'm not familiar with the artist, or not particularly familiar with the genre, it's nice. Even some of it I really enjoy, some of it I don't. But it's nice to not have to keep track while I'm listening. And I've tried to bring that into my classical music listening, in a way that fosters joy. And I found myself drawn to some pretty complex music, some non-oboe music, if you can believe it, such as like the late Beethoven string quartets. That are, even if I wanted to listen analytically, I don't think I'd get everything. And just enjoy them on just a more fundamental level. And sort of the flip side of that is, I've recently created a couple playlists for like exercising, like indoor cycling, that contain like high energy orchestra rep that you'd see on like a pop show or that a youth orchestra would play. That like most orchestra musicians, I feel like, would be embarrassed to say that it's fun and enjoyable, but I'm not. like it just makes exercising less unpleasant, and it's bouncy and fun, and it just happens to be the genre that I'm most passionate about. And then just to add to that, it's not necessarily musical, but yeah, I always have CBC on in my car. One of my favorite shows is Reclaimed, and podcasts have been my saving grace for all the hours of processing reed cane and making reeds. And thank goodness for podcasts from an oboist. And yeah, my favorite podcast right now is called You're Wrong About. And yeah, I've just really enjoyed it. Fun, but also gets you to think.
Okay, so You're Wrong About. That sounds like it might have a comedic tone to it, does it?
Yeah, absolutely. Like the subject matter is not necessarily comedic. Like they really delve into some, occasionally pretty gritty stuff, occasionally just like really interesting stuff. Occasionally they'll take like a piece of literature and just sort of examine the cultural context. But it's sort of, I think at the core, it's about just like, a fun and, but also like very thought-provoking way to unpack things. And I think the humor comes about just because of there's two hosts and they sometimes have guests, and just their natural like synthesis of their two characters. They're both like really funny, witty people. So they often have just hilarious ways of describing totally normal things.
The hosts make the podcasts, I would say. Yeah,
Totally.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so one other question to follow up on then. Do you have a favorite symphonic piece that you work out to, that you will admit to listening to?
I'd have to there's a Cacciatorian piece. It's just like I forget the title, but I could even like quickly look, but it's just super like fun and bouncy. It's only like 2 minutes. Oh, Dance of Saber Dance. It's only like 2 minutes long, so I have to, obviously put like 28 more minutes on my working out playlist. But it's, I don't know, it's kind of like headbanging orchestra music, and it's like perfect for working out.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. Okay, so now we get to the big question, which is, and I'm even like after this is I think my 13th interview with musicians, and I'm evolving how I ask the question. So the initial question is, what does music mean to you? And and by that it's like, what is it that drives you to be this person who creates music on a regular basis? If that helps clarify the question, I don't know. So I'll just leave that there, and you can take it wherever you want to.
Okay. Yeah. So I totally get that is a huge question, because I think like, it's sort of a cliche, but music goes beyond words. Music was here before language was. So it's really hard to put your finger on it. But I think what I would come up with is that it's a process of discovery and self-discovery. I think at the most fundamental level, whether, you're just like a 6-year-old piano Suzuki kid, or you're Martha Argerich, or, someone like that, Leon Fleischer, at every level, you're going to encounter challenges, and you have to just sort of bring creative problem solving to every obstacle you tackle. There's no one way to really elevate yourself. There's so many different ways, and in finding your path, in just growing as a musician, growing technically, sort of growing from the perspective of what you're saying with your music, really gives you a lot of information about who you are. I think you learn a lot about yourself. Most fundamentally, how do you solve problems? More broadly speaking, I think this can take place on the level of a community as well. Musicians and musical organizations engaging with the people who live and have always lived in the region that these organizations exist, and using music as sort of as a language to build connections, build curiosity, finding a shared focus, And just all of us, composer, performer, listener, we're trying to use this art form as a way to represent an idea as a whole, as a unity, rather than, I guess, like strictly abstract. Um, I don't know if that, I feel like I'm kind of circling around an
That's
answer.
okay. It's a hard question. I will say it's a very hard question to answer, and that's why I have started apologizing for asking it right at the beginning, while we're still kind of working our way into this. But I wonder about, because you talked earlier about having moved, like, actually enjoy, like, finding a way to enjoy music, not just analyze it when you listen to it, right? And I think you're right. Like, the self-discovery piece is huge in music. And I think when we see those 6-year-old kids in Suzuki piano or Suzuki violin and cello, I don't think they even realize the journey they've entered onto when they get there, right? Because for them, it's more about, do I really have to sit still for 30 minutes? Because we really want to move around, right? So and you're not the first person to say it's about self-discovery. And yeah. So, okay, I'm just going to feel free to answer as much or as little of this as you want. But so if music is partly around self-discovery, but also about problem solving, so where do you see the problem solving fitting into music?
I think it starts at the level of the body. And this is I'm always trying with my students and with myself. Like, it's not about me saying, oh, that didn't sound right, or that didn't work. I mean, you have to do that because they don't always know. But it's about developing instincts. And even things like sort of what we think of as our simple music building blocks, like major is happy, minor is sad, diminished is angry, like the primary colors of music are cross-cultural, actually, just on a very fundamental level. Obviously there's a huge amount of divergence when you get even just a little bit more complex across all musics, but I think that yeah, I think we almost all of us have this sounds good, I like this does not sound good, I don't like it, sort of built in. And that's based on any number of things like genetic or environmental. And I think it's honing those into really good musical instincts. And then finding ways to get more stuff into the I like this category. Like, a really simplistic example of that would be, I'll probably end up talking a lot about reeds, so why not start now? um, with reed making, if I make a reed that, I thought I did everything right, but it just sounds unpleasant, like screechy and whatever, my ears immediately tell me, no, discard that reed. But someone who's new to that process are like, something's not right, I don't know what it is. So it's getting from that sort of like really fundamental, I'm finding joy in this experience, to, how can I foster that enjoyment, not just for myself, but in a way that I think is more broadly pleasing.
Yeah, that's so. I'm just going to touch it because you also obviously teach,
Yeah.
and I think that's part of. I've come to realize, not that I knew it as a teenager when I was taking music lessons, but I think as an adult, I've come to realize that part of the role of the teacher is to help students find joy in that, right? Like, because like students that want to learn music probably already find joy in music, but the journey to learning along the way is not always fun.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll jump off there and I'll say, how did you get started with oboe?
Well, I think almost everyone here kind of knows, but I personally still think it's kind of a circuitous and maybe a little bit humorous path. So, I'm happy to tell it. Some might have familiarity with our educational show that we video recorded this year. I know, well, Carmen participated in it. Obviously, she had a role. So it was called The Crow's Prophecy, and when it was originally written by Marie Noel, it drew on the origin stories of many of the RSCP players, how we got started in music, and bits and pieces made it into the story itself with a heavy dose of magical realism, which is why it's a fun video. So my story made it in was one of the ones that sort of made it in, but the yeah, I guess the memoir, the memoir version, started with me playing recorder, as so many elementary school kids did. I practiced, I liked it, I thought it was a lot of fun. My friend was in it too, and I progressed pretty quickly. So when I was 9, I went. I think it was the first time I went to this camp. It was a 2-week camp. We did sports, choir, recorder, normal camp stuff. And for 1 hour a day, we were given the opportunity to play an orchestral wind or brass. Yeah, super cool, super great way to introduce kids to, yeah, instruments above and beyond the recorder, shall we say. Now the recorder is a great instrument, it's a beautiful instrument, but yeah. So I had eyes only for the oboe, and another girl snapped it up. So I was given a trombone as a consolation prize. And I was like, okay, I got this. I was probably about the same size as a trombone, so I blew into it as hard as I could and I let go of the slide. At which point it was taken away from me, and somehow the teacher of the class rustled up an oboe for me. Uh, at which point I broke the reed immediately. And this wonderful teacher I guess, whose patience was only surpassed by her kindness, found an indestructible plastic reed for me to play on. So at the end of the 2 weeks, I had to give back the oboe, unfortunately, but I could keep the reed. So I, hung on to it for a whole year, went back the next summer. I was like, well, I already have a reed, so you better give me the oboe, which they did. I had a great summer there. I think I played Pachelbel's Canon, was my big achievement on the oboe that summer. And then after that, so I would have been going into grade 6. I was 10. My parents were fortunately persuaded and convinced to buy me a plastic Yamaha oboe and start me with lessons with my little sister's friend's mom. So yeah, so that's how I started the oboe.
So it wasn't, see, now you're the first person I've met that didn't start, or that we've talked to that didn't start with school band.
Yeah, it's quite unusual actually, and in a way, it worked out rather well because in Ontario at the time, we don't start school band until grade 7. So I already had a year of oboe playing under my belt. So when I showed up in grade 7, I was ready to go. I could read music. I had an oboe. I knew how to play whole 9 yards. Unfortunately, I'm not sure of the whole story here, but for one reason or another, I was told that I could not play the oboe in school band at that point. To my whole family's great frustration. So I was given a flute to play for a year. And I love the flute. The flute's a gorgeous instrument, but it was not my instrument. And I think a contributing factor was, it was an inner city school. It was maybe not the most experienced band teacher, but I continued to play the oboe, played the school flute once a week or whatever. And then by grade 8, I think the teacher maybe saw the error of her ways and permitted me to join the flute section on the oboe. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I grew up in Ontario and our band program didn't start till grade 9. And when I thought I wanted to play the flute, and all my relatives who, especially like the band teacher relative, was saying, no, Krista, you should play the oboe. You're so musical. Play the oboe. Your band teacher will learn your name the first day if you say you want to go play the oboe. And I'm like, okay. So I didn't know what I was doing. I went in and said, I want to play oboe. And his reaction was, I usually make people play the clarinet for a year first. And And I think I learned from him, because your story sounds like there are teachers who come through the educational system who are slightly afraid of oboes,
Yeah.
because as you know, I'm sure from listening to many beginner lessons, there are times when it can sound really screechy on the ears.
Oh, definitely.
And yeah, and so the teacher, my teacher anyway, he explained, well, it's usually I want you to learn on a slightly easier instrument because I need to make sure you can read music before you're trying to read music and learn how to play the oboe. He's like, but you already know how to read music, so maybe I'll let you go ahead and start with oboe in grade 9. But that, like, I almost wonder if that was something that was going through the school system at some point in Ontario, about start them on something else until you make sure they can read music.
Yeah, and that I think that there's merit to that. Like I definitely encourage people to start the oboe after they've learned to read music. But at the same time, like we shouldn't be in the business of thwarting passion, And if a kid is like, that sound is for me, that captures my heart or whatever, I think that there's always a solution. And I've definitely been super impressed that the school system, particularly the public school system in Regina, I've gotten to know so many awesome, innovative band teachers, and they're like, you know what? We'll figure something out. We'll bring you in. We'll, move a few things around. This kid wants to play the oboe. Let's make it happen for them. And I think that's such a great thing. And not every kid, some kids are going to try and they're going to be like, nope, not for me. Like I was with the trombone. And other kids are going to take it to it like a fish to water. So I think that, you know, sure, elevate it in the sense that, okay, this instrument, it has a steeper learning curve on at the beginning than some of these other instruments. But yeah, I think sort of being divisive about who gets to play the oboe and what are those qualifications is maybe, a bit of a slippery slope for the educational program. So yeah.
Who knows? So okay, so you played through your band, and then did you go into a music degree after that, or what happened after high school?
So yeah, I actually went to the University of Toronto for music. I studied with the principal oboe of the Toronto Symphony at the time, Richard Dorsey. During high school, I was actually super lucky. Well, yeah, definitely lucky in retrospect. My sister's friend's mom, I loved her to death. She actually moved away within the first year of me taking lessons with her. Her husband at the time was awarded a job with the Berlin Philharmonic, so the whole family relocated. Yeah, it's a huge deal. And somehow, I don't know if she pulled some strings or what, but I found myself with a spot in the studio of one of the National Arts Center Orchestra oboists. And she was absolutely wonderful. She had a bit of a tough love approach, but it wasn't without humor. It was the exact right thing for me. So I think her guiding me toward going to U of T, yeah, that was a really good thing for me at the time. I absolutely adored being at U of T. I loved living in Toronto. I loved my teacher in Toronto too. I had a very positive, formative experience both in the high school and the early years of university. And yeah, after U of T, I went on. I was really, again, incredibly fortunate to have the opportunity to study in the US. I went to Boston University for my master's. Then I took a year off to kind of figure a few things out, I guess. I was like, whoa, I didn't think this was this hard. Until now, it's just getting harder. At which point, I enrolled at one of the smaller schools in Boston. It has a different name now, but at the time it was called the Boston Conservatory, which is where I did what's called a graduate performance diploma. Jokingly, I would describe that as like a master's degree with none of the homework. So it was kind of the perfect thing for me. I didn't have to write any essays or read boring texts I didn't want to read. And my teacher during that period of my studies was Rob Sheena. He is the English horn player of the Boston Symphony. and again, I'm still kind of like, whoa, he took me on? He was incredible. And I think the fact that, and I was a little bit older, so I would have been, I had 2 degrees under my belt already. So I already knew how to make reeds. We didn't have to deal with any of that stuff, which I think he was kind of relieved about. So his focus was English horn. He obviously was an incredible oboe player, but an English horn job in a big orchestra, especially a big orchestra like the Boston Symphony, is a very different kettle of fish than singing the oboe section. You're part of the same section, but it's way more chill, basically. And that was really reflected in his personality. He was all about just making great music and not subscribing to sort of any of these like negative stereotypes of being a neurotic oboe player. He was not about that at all. If I played something really well, he was just like, that was awesome. And he was just excited for me. So I really credit him with, yeah, just helping me stick it out and feeling positive about what I was doing at the time.
So after Boston, did you return to Toronto then? And created
Yeah,
a quintet?
yeah. So after that, I didn't really have a way to stay in the US anymore. Um, as a Canadian, as a non-American. So I ended up in Toronto. I already knew that city, had family, friends. So definitely not the worst decision I could have made. It's kind of hard to figure out what you're going to do once music school's done. Um, and I kind of floundered about a little bit for that first year. Tried to pick up some orchestra work here and there. Second year, things got a bit better. I was still taking auditions, and the second year was when I joined the wind quintet, which was a lot of fun. I sort of had I found started finding my groove a bit better. I picked up a couple students, and yeah, then I guess probably maybe 20 months into that time was when I won the job in Regina. And yeah, I guess if it makes sense that as soon as things were kind of picking up steam in my freelance career was when I took the next step. But yeah, I'm really glad about how it ended up working out.
So as because I also moved from Ontario to Saskatchewan, what made you think I would like to move to Regina other than a job?
Well, employment. I've taken so many orchestral auditions. I'm not meaning to put myself down at all, but the skill set necessary for playing strong auditions very consistently isn't one that has come easily to me. I'm not somebody who's passionate about taking auditions. I think it's hard to find people who are, but some people are very good at it. So honestly, if an orchestra was prepared to offer me full-time pay, I was just going to go anywhere. I was hoping for a Canadian job, obviously, and at that point, I was growing less and less interested in auditioning for American orchestras. And I thought, this is just a new adventure. I'm looking for change. I'm looking for the next thing. I'm also looking for well, stability was part of it, but sort of a platform, like thinking of an orchestra job as a platform whereby you can explore your artistic self and your artistic interests, but still know that more than just a regular paycheck. You still have like solidity and a community in which you have a role. You have a role to play. So that turned out to be Regina. I put my mom in charge of finding me an apartment and my dad in charge of finding me a car. And yeah, thanks to him and the car he chose for me, I learned to drive stick, um, which I'm really glad about. And yeah, I came on out here.
Okay, so it sounds like you actually chose to be a full-time musician. Like it's not
Absolutely.
like, because I've talked to some people that are like, well, it just kind of happened. I'm like, how does it just happen? But if you were freelancing in Toronto, that was really, so what was it that drove you to want to be that full-time person playing music, performing, teaching, doing all of those things that come with a freelance career?
Well, to be honest, freelancing was definitely not my first choice. And some people are cut out for it. I'm not really. I wouldn't probably go back to that. But the other side of that, of course, is I couldn't imagine any other life that other than being a musician. I really think of it as a lifestyle and a calling instead of, just this is my job, this is my career. And I think that, yeah, it's just who I am, kind of. And just when I kind of look back on my childhood and what I was into and sort of, the person I was turning out to be, I think, artistic pursuits and self-expression were pretty high on my list. And just as I got a bit older, like finding my own way of doing things, and kind of in the process of figuring out how to do something or to solve a problem, really making it my own. And that's something, at least with my more advanced students, I try to bring that into their process, rather than this is how you play this piece. This is a cookie cutter. It's like, no, really learn it well and make it your own. So yeah, I think identifying that early really helped, yeah, clarify that this was the right path for me.
I like how you talk about, like, I agree. I think being a musician is a calling, but I know I don't have the personality to be a full-time musician. So like, I wouldn't go on auditions because they just totally, yeah. But I'm also a piano player. So pianists are different than orchestra. So, but I knew very early on, I didn't have the personality for it. Even though I love music, I'm passionate about it. Yeah. So it's that part of that. I think if we're thinking about students, like part of that self-discovery is realizing, do I actually have the personality to go along with my passion in music to go and do this, as if I'm looking towards a career path where I want to go. I like the calling aspect, but it's also, I was talking to Adrian Cassis a few weeks ago, and he said, I'm not like, I can't remember exactly how he said it, but it's like, wherever we're making music, like that's what we're doing. We're musicians, and so we're making music, and it doesn't have to be my full-time job, because he works at the university. He says, that's my day job that pays for my passion in music. That's what that is. So yeah. And some of us who work in administration and other places will probably always have that. Well, I do music on the side. So my music is, I do music outside of my work job, but yeah. Okay, so I'm going to ask for you, what does a typical workday look like pre-COVID? Let's go pre-COVID. Yeah.
Yeah, nothing typical about the COVID situation. So yeah, what my day looks like really depends on whether we have a morning service with the RSO, an evening service, or if it's a concert day. And I guess on balance, well, it's hard to say. I guess we have kind of half and half, evening and morning. But if it's an evening service, that usually gives me a good chunk of my day to practice and make reads. And I'm usually up pretty early. Not only is my spouse in the trades, and he leaves for work shortly after 7. So if I want to see him, got to get up. And there's always like a lot to do. So yeah, I usually start out with some stretches, some deep breathing, maybe a little meditation. Always keeping in mind the oboe is a physically demanding instrument. I want to start my day by getting the air moving, getting myself, physically ready to respect the stamina it takes. Then generally first hour to an hour and a half is devoted to practicing. I really try to leave my phone off in another room so I'm not distracted. And then that way, if I'm working on something really challenging, within the RSO programming or outside, hopefully there will be time later in the day to keep chipping away at it. But if there's not, it's like there's always that chunk of time that is devoted to practicing. Even during the summer, I'll do that. Because if I procrastinate it probably won't happen. Next couple hours after that's out of the way is read making. Again, lots of reads, always making reads. Then I try to squeeze in some physical activity, whether that's yoga, cycling, outdoors or indoors, cross-country skiing in the winter. Yeah, just something to get moving. Afternoon, usually more read making or answer some emails. And if it's a teaching day, lessons and then rehearsal in the evening. If it's a morning service, I still try to, get in some stretches and breathing and a really thorough warm up if I have time for it, scales and long tones before I go to work, because I know that once I get to rehearsal, even if I show up early, there's meetings and chit chats and, looking at things on my email and just really, yeah, really trying to prioritize. I'm definitely not always successful. Just getting my sound going and getting my air moving before I try to play, real music. Yeah, and then, whenever you get home, you proceed with whatever practicing and read making has to get done. That being said, I will just add, and I think the oboe differs a little bit from even other winds. The weeks that we normally have morning services tend to feature somewhat more challenging repertoire, like our Government House series. So it's actually those weeks I have to be a little bit careful about not over practicing. I don't want to get to the concert day and have no embouchure functioning at all, or a sore wrist or whatever. So yeah, that's really just an example of weeks where I've just got to plan in advance and be really organized around my practicing. And the same applies to concert days. You need to find that balance between really solid warm up, really know what my reads are doing, really know what my air is doing, where my sound is at, staying super zeroed in on the repertoire, but not being like, oh, we have something kind of tricky coming up. I'll just take a little bit and and just it's a question of mental focus and mental stamina, but also like, don't be silly, don't make bad decisions, save your endurance for the show.
It is very physical then. It's very physical, like it's not just mental. There's very okay. So we've got a few minutes left. I have two. I know it's gone fast. I have two questions. So and you can take them in whichever order you want. One is what do you know now about being a full-time musician that you maybe wish you had known? I don't know if it was back in high school or in that early undergrad degree. So what do you know now about being a full-time musician that you wish you'd known earlier? And the other question I have is just maybe tell us a little, like, it sounds like you make reads all the time. Does it feel like you are a read factory? Like,
it absolutely does. It totally feels like I'm a read factory. So I'd say to answer the first question, I was told that the volume of reads I would have to make once I had an orchestra job or full-time professional was monumental. But I was like, oh, whatever. Here I am. Actually, during this COVID year, I've barely made any reads, and it's the one time in my life I guess I'll have a little break from that. But it's also like, wow, like I'm not making any reads. It's weird. But I mean, above and beyond that, I mean, I would say kind of the two most important things I didn't know before that I guess could have been I could have been benefited from knowing is what happens off the stage in an orchestra. There's a whole, it's not just the necessary like administration and just there's a lot of planning and organization. Oh, I see Linda has a question. I will definitely get to that question very shortly because there is no short answer to that. But yeah, like even, things like how do you negotiate a truly fair contract? What are the safety protocols in a performing arts organization in before COVID as well as during COVID, although that's kind of where our minds are going. And also like liaising with other orchestras in Canada, like what's our relationship with Symphony Nova Scotia? Turns out we have one, and that's important. They're a little bit bigger than us. They have, a lot of chamber music happening. There's a reason why we're all part of one community and we need to talk to each other. And yeah, and just how to keep the work environment healthy, especially between all different branches of the RSO, musicians, management, staff, board, and patrons. That's super important to keep an orchestra thriving. And then just on top of that, I would just add, the advocacy for the arts and artists is all of our responsibility. And likewise, I think that as artists, we also have a role and responsibility in advocating for inclusivity and being a relevant organization through diversity of who we're serving and who is on stage with us. I never thought about those things when I was taking auditions. I just thought about good reads and accurate playing. And I'm thinking about those things, and it's pretty interesting.
Well, and I will say that's not what I was thinking about when I was in doing my music degree either. That
Yeah.
it was about getting through the next course, making sure I met the requirements for my juries, just learning and absorbing as much as I could. But you're right, those were not things I was necessarily thinking about when I was in student mode. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely. So
yeah.
I'll just quickly answer your second question, then I'll talk a bit more about reads. Yeah, I guess what changes have I seen? That was the second question, right? Okay. Yeah,